Welcome to the Best Music Podcast, where we see behind the curtain and discover the hidden habits and success secrets of noteworthy music makers so you can speed up your journey to your dream music goals by taking what you need from their wins and lessons learned along the way. I'm your host, Dan Spencer, and this week's featured guest is ClascyJitto. ClascyJitto is a musician, artist, and video game developer who also makes music under the name RiZi. That's R-I-Z-I exclamation point. He's a composer for the successful game Pizza Tower. His new game called Kipidon is a Katamari-inspired shooter. A link to the soundtrack and a link to the demo of the game is going to be in the show notes if you're on audio and in the video description if you are on YouTube. ClascyJitto, thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule of creating games, soundtracks, and amazing things for everyone to come hang out with us here on the Best Music Podcast.
No problem.
So, tell me a little bit about what you think creativity is.
Well, it's just like natural, like human instinct for me. I feel like babies, like you put, like you give them like a piece of paper, they'll start like drawing and whatnot. Like that's just like innate to like everyone, I feel like.
So what happens? Why do some people lose touch with that?
I don't know. Maybe they get interested in like something else. Maybe I don't know. It varies from person to person. It's very sort of specific in that way.
For you, do you take any steps to maintain that mind space, right? Because it's like, if I was to say, okay, ClascyJitto, you're just going to do math problems for the next, like all you're going to do for 9 hours a day is you're going to do math for like 3 months. Do you think that would have an impact on your creativity?
No, I don't think so, because when I was in school, when I was in school, like math problems, I was always like doodle on this side of the paper anyways, like while doing it. So it doesn't really matter to me. My brain will always find a way to do something at least sort of creative. And
one of the things that I love about listening to some of the music you've created, especially on the Pizza Tower original soundtrack, is the playfulness and the creativity of taking established forms or established ideas where we think we know where they're going, but then you're like, you know what? Actually, we're going to go somewhere new where we've never gone before, so come with me on this wild ride, and we're going to go. So can you talk a little bit about how that inspiration feels for you? Like, is it ever an idea where you know what the structure is and you want to purposefully break away from that? Or do you just start from the structure, or is there some other combination in there?
So starting like any song, I usually have some sort of idea in mind already. And then from there, it sort of just comes out. Like I'm working on it, and it just, how do I explain it? It's like, that's wherever it feels like it needs to go. It's just like, okay, yeah, that's where it's going to go then. It's usually sort of like autocomplete in my head. I was like, okay, that's where that should go.
What I'm hearing you saying too is it's a lot about listening to feeling and feeling what should happen and being in touch with what we feel. Can you talk a little bit about being in touch with feelings and how that helps creativity?
Well, that's a grand question. I feel like, I never really thought about that. Because I guess I'm already sort of like a person who's like, just does what they want to do already. So I don't even, yeah, I don't even try to try. I just I don't know. I don't know.
You just follow the feeling. And
yeah.
Do you find that you sort of, that you have to do that in all areas of your life to be true to yourself? So it's like the music is the part that maybe you share with the rest of the world, but when it comes to other things you do, you still follow the feeling.
Yeah, because it just feels off and wrong, and I feel bad in either, no matter what. If I try to do something and I don't agree with what I did, it's It sucks. I don't like it.
In creativity, objectively speaking, there's no such thing as right or wrong, right? There's going to be the subjective right or wrong from the creative person's perspective. So, do you ever have a moment where you feel like you made a mistake? Or is it just almost a binary option of I either followed my creativity or I didn't?
Well, if I'm sort of like looking back on like an older song, like there are some songs on this soundtrack which are like were made in like 2018, 2019, and like listening back, I'd be like, that doesn't really sound as good. But when I was making it, that's where I felt like I wanted it to be. And so it's not really, when I listen back to it, it's not really a case of like, oh, this is like wrong. It's more like I'm listening to it and I'm approaching it with a different framework in mind. And so it's like, okay, I would have done this very differently. And that's sort of like where like, this kind of sounds bad. That's sort of where that comes from for me.
But that's also a beautiful thing because it's showing that you're growing as an artist,
Yeah.
it's showing you're growing as a human. It's showing that you are finding new ground. You have new things to say. It's bittersweet. Like you don't like it because it's like, you could do something different now, but at the same time, it's glorious, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's also nice that like everyone else also just enjoys it anyway. And so it's like, okay, so it doesn't even matter really.
Have you ever tried making a piece of music where instead of thinking about what would feel right for you, you thought about what other people might like?
I would say not really. The closest I've gotten to it is like trying to like imitate a specific style, really. But it was more of just like, I think it would like sound good if like it wasn't like this like sort of person style instead of like this needs to sound good for other people or whatever.
Well, ClascyJitto, if you don't mind my asking, a lot of the music you make has a lot of history in it. What are we hearing in these moments where we can recognize things and sort of point back in history to something else?
So a lot of the music, specifically for like Pizza Tower, it was very much inspired by like what I was listening to like at the moment. And most of it was like very like more like contemporary, like modern stuff, right? And so like for example, Frank Jazz C, and Sungazer, which is cool like jazz fusion, whatever. I can't think of anything else, but I guess in those you could trace something back, and then from that inspiration, when it's heard like on my song, people like think, not like say like it's like entirely incorrect, but like people like think like, oh, it's like a sort of like, oh, this is like 90s like nostalgia or like something like that. But it's like, to be quite honest, I have zero nostalgia, but it is cool. Not to say it sucks. It is cool. But yeah, I took most inspirations from like more like modern stuff of what I was listening to. And from there you can go back and whatever. And I think that's cool. I always liked the sort of like I guess Inception type thing where like it just like keeps like this so many layers on layers of like how like far back you can go. I always thought that was cool.
In terms of where you come from a structural place in music, did you ever take music lessons?
Well, early on, the most I had was like a random like YouTube videos like that like describe things for me, and I was like, from there I sort of like built my own sort of made up version of music theory in my head of like just generally what chords like sound good together. I did take an AP music theory class in like my last year of high school. Like that was, but like that's it in terms of like my musical training. Like I learned guitar and I know a little bit of piano, like, but that's it in terms of like actual like training, I guess.
That's beautiful. You are, and I mean this as the highest compliment, you are what I call a creative genius. Like,
Thank you.
yeah. And I mean that in the most sincere way. I mean that in the most sincere way. And honestly, it's really cool to talk with you. And it's also really cool to listen to your music because you go to places that for someone like me, I'm not a creative genius. I am creative. I'm not a creative genius. To hear someone like yourself follow those feelings inside of yourself and go to those places that you go to, it's a joy. It's a joy. So I just wanted to express that and share that with you because it's really cool stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. So to bring it back to where we started, because I want to hammer back on this. You know, you said it's a tricky thing for people to follow what they feel. And I agree with you that when we look at babies, you know, you hand them a pen and paper or a crayon and paper. It's without thinking, they take it and and then they're done, right? They've expressed something, they've created a feel like they've done something, and then that's it, right? It's game over. Do you ever do any exercises besides obviously every day feeling and living like this? Do you ever give yourself creative exercises? Do you ever give yourself parameters? Do you ever play games with yourself?
I'm not often, but there was sort of around like 2020 or like 2021, one of those years. I started doing this thing where, and I didn't come up with this. I think Ben Levin came up with this idea. You can look him up or whatever. But just the idea of just like making just the worst song, like come in, like open whatever DAW, and then just like make music just like based on like all of the insecurities you have about your art and just make it just like awful and terrible. And then from there, the cool thing about it is that through that you'll find some like interesting parts, like, hold on, that sounded kind of like cool actually, and then you can like use that for like something else. So like I've done that like a couple times. I actually, now that I'm describing it, I want to do it again actually. But yeah, that's something that I've did.
When you say it's awful and terrible, is it awful and terrible as in it sounds bad, or it's awful and terrible because it's a true reflection of all these parts of oneself that are like, we all have good stuff and we all have bad stuff inside of ourselves, and to acknowledge and to look at the bad stuff can really be painful, right? It can really hurt. So is it bad because of the feeling of looking so deeply into the shadow side, into the dark side of yourself, or is it bad just because musically it's just not that hot?
I would say both, honestly. Yeah, because you have to do both in order to get like the really like, oh, this actually sounds like cool actually, like yeah, just a lot of like experimentation like that can be fun to mess around with.
How would you explain to someone how to do that exercise if you had to walk them through it step by step? Like, how would you explain to someone to get in touch with their feelings? Like, do they have to pay attention to what they feel in their chest? Do they need to pay attention to what they feel in their belly? Do they need to pay attention to how it feels around their ears? Like, what do people need to pay attention to tap into those feelings?
I have no idea. I really have no idea. Cause like, this is like, cause like, I'm just like living, like I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I would honestly have no idea. I have no advice for that.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you ever find yourself doing one of these exercises and you're like, oh yeah, there's like, if I think about my second rib on the right side and at the same time sort of like touch my belly button, it all works. So look, if you figure out some magic like connection thing there, please let us know. And until then, you know, keep rocking and making some awesome music. Oh, what's something you wished people talked more about with the Pizza Tower soundtrack that you don't see a lot of people talking about?
Hmm. It's interesting. Well, I guess people do talk about that. I was gonna say like just the like certain like samples and sources because I think that's the most one of the more interesting parts about it. But also, actually, no, scratch that. I like the chord progressions. Actually, that's like my favorite part of the soundtrack as a whole.
Yeah,
Like
I thought some of your work with the major seven chords was really cool. Just neat. Like neat.
I think ever since I found out what a major seven was, I just never stopped using them. Still to this day.
What is it about the major seven chord that you find so enticing?
It's just pretty. Something about that. Something about just like the root note of the C and then B. That together is just really pretty sounding. And then adding stuff on top of that is also like a major seven, like sharp 11.
Yeah,
it's really good.
Yeah. Okay, so talking about the chord progressions, there are some very fascinating chord progressions, and it is one of the I would venture to say hallmarks of originality around the soundtrack is the interesting chord progressions. Could you talk a little bit? You started on the samples.
Yeah.
Could you please? And you don't need to hold like you can go full sample nerd. Like I see maybe that there's a sample nerd hiding in there inside of you somewhere. If you want to go full, like go for it, like all the way.
Oh, you just want me to start going ham?
Just go it. Just go. Just go.
Yeah, there's just like, I think the way I'm trying to think about where to even start. Where do I even start with it?
Anywhere. We'll figure it out.
I just think sampling is just really fun to do. Like, and I wish I did it like a little bit more. Looking back, I probably would have done it a little bit more if I were to do it now. But it's just like a lot of cool like samples. There's a lot of like stuff from like, because most of the samples, if it wasn't from like a sample CD or anything, it was from like something that I was like already listening to, and that's like something I love about sampling. I just like sampling stuff like that I like enjoy listening to. Like it's like I don't even usually like search for something to sample. Like I usually am like already like a fan of it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna use this actually because it sounds pretty good, and it would work here. Yeah, that's all. Well, I guess
there are some wild sample moments. I don't recall. Did you happen to work on the track where when you get what you want, you don't want it was sampled?
That is Sauce, man. That is really good also. I really like that one.
That was nuts. That was bananas.
Yeah. I really want to do something like that in the future.
Once you hear it, right? It's like once you hear it, you're like, you know what?
I love how it's sort of atonal. I don't know how to describe it, but it's sort of just like in the midway where it's just like just like evil. I don't know. It's just like the evil like of the bass, and it's just like it's like strange like 20s sample, 1920s sample, and it's just like this is awesome. This is sick.
Yeah, and it's like maybe polytonal. Like if we're gonna put our music theory nerd hats on, like maybe polytonal would be a word we could use, where it's like two keys that like almost match up and have one or two notes different between each other, and then you get that clash of like these moments in the sample where it's like it's not lining up with all the other notes behind it, and it's just
And then I just made this connection because it's sort of because the whole podcast is just talking about this one song. No, but I just thought about this because like it starts because the sample is like like that's like the sort of tonic, I guess, and then like the other parts around it is like but it's like minor also. It's in minor because like the sample is in major but it's minor, but it's on the same root note, I guess.
Yeah. So that's parallel major and parallel minor against
Yeah.
each other. So the thirds would be different, and then possibly the sixths and the sevenths would also be different. So you'd have three notes that would be one half step apart from each other.
Yeah.
For those of you who are playing music theory bingo at home, you can go ahead and check off parallel major and minor on your scorecards.
Got a bingo.
What is something you wish people would take away? Or what is your intention for people to take away from listening to your music? Is there an overall mission? Does it change from song to song?
Not really. I would say although I do make songs with like a meaning in my head, I never explicitly like say it because I want people to just take away whatever they feel like it. As long as it makes sense, I don't care what you take away from it.
As long as someone is taking some meaning from something you've created, whatever that meaning may be, as long as they've created some meaning, you're good. Like, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
If you couldn't make music, what would you do?
Art, but I already do that. I just draw and make games and have someone else make music for them.
I love how you always have a creative workaround. I'm like, let me box you into a question. If you could only do math for 3 months, you're like, well, I doodle on the side. I'm like, okay, you can't do music. Well, I do other art. Someone else who did the music. I love it. It's amazing. What's your favorite piece that you created for the Pizza Tower OST, if you don't mind my asking?
Okay, it's a 3-way tie. Actually, it's a 4-way tie of Don't Preheat Your Oven, Woodpecker, Funiculi Holiday, and then Wednesdays.
Why do you like Wednesdays so much more than Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, or any of the other days?
Because to start off, it's one of the more recent songs that I made for it. Like, that was one of the last songs I think that I made. There was that and Funiculi Holiday that were like the most one of the last songs made for it. And I think in both of those, I just really like them. I just like the instrumentation. I also, on Wednesdays, is one of the few songs that I played actual guitar, because usually Sauceman does that. But on Wednesdays, I also got my guitar right here. It's this one. I played that.
Beautiful.
I played it on Wednesdays. We put that back. All right. But yeah, I played that. It was really fun. It was really fun to make. And hold on. And it's also like a sort of, I wouldn't say like a sequel or anything, because it's not. But I purposely made the instrumentation similar to another song I made called like Fourth Dimension Vacation, I think I called it. It was something like that. But yeah, I made the instrumentation like similar to that on purpose, because I thought it would be like a neat thing, since it's like based on like vacations anyway. That'd be tie into like the theme of the floor anyway.
So it's like a meta artist level statement where disconnected artworks are connected through you?
Yeah. Kind of, yeah, pretty much.
Awesome. How do you go about picking the name for a song?
It is usually most of the time I when I'm saving the project, I'm thinking of the name right then and there, and that's usually what I end up sticking with, just the first thing I think of immediately. Some of the song, you can tell on some of the song titles that it was literally just me just started typing it away, just like without even thinking. Like, yes, with the tree on my pizza. That was I literally just started typing that because I didn't feel like naming it. I was like, yeah, that's the name of the song, actually. It's going to be called that.
Now, there's an interesting thing that you just said. It's when you create without thinking, you can come up with these disconnected ideas. Well, what might seem, from a logical perspective, disconnected. Can you talk a little bit about that brain state of creativity where it's like you have to be present enough that you're doing what you're doing, but also disconnect your brain a little bit? It's kind of like surfing. It's like you have to kind of balance on the surfboard, because if you think too much, then you might not be creative. But if you think too little, then you couldn't do the task, right? You couldn't manipulate your fingers to touch the keys of the computer or the keyboard. Can you talk a little bit about that brain state?
I don't know. I never thought about it. I never thought about it. It's sort of just like my body takes over a little bit. It's like it's like the same thing. It's like the same thing of like turning on my computer and like typing something or whatever. It's just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this, and it feels good.
You turn the creative switch on. You just go to the place.
Yeah, pretty much. And if I'm not feeling it, I'll just close it and then do it later.
How long do you give yourself before you decide that you're not feeling it?
I will keep trying until it is unsalvageable.
Okay. What does unsalvageable mean?
Like, if I can't get it to sound right or the way that I want it to, and if I've been trying at it for like 10, 30 minutes, I was like, okay, this is not working.
Okay. About 30 minutes. And then what, you like stand up, you take a break, you go do something else, maybe do a drawing,
Yeah,
go outside.
I'll just close it and then I'll do something else. Yeah.
And then you come back that same day, a different day, depends.
It's either I come back to it or I just do something else completely. I just started like a new thing.
Mm-hmm. Do you find it useful to be working on more than one track at a time so you can ping pong between things when you're not feeling them?
I feel like I do that like not even for that purpose. I just do that because like I guess sort of like ADHD like mind. I just like I was like, oh, I want to work on this now. I was like, I'm bored. I want to work on this now. Like, I just do that.
Do you go about thinking of instrumentation? We could also call instrumentation arrangement. Do you go about thinking of that by listening to other genres and then picking out what instrument is doing what, and then kind of saying, well, okay, this is the approximate role of this instrument. This is the approximate role of this instrument. Now let's have them do something approximating those roles here in this song?
Well, I think, yeah, it's sort of like that. It's like I'll be listening to something like, ooh, that sounds kind of like cool. Like, what if I did something like that, but then like I made it like all weird and messed up? Like, what if I just like, I don't know. I just think about different ways I can sort of iterate on it and make it sound sort of not unique. I can't find the word for this, but just sort of make it its own in a way. That's like the usual way ideas for stuff like comes to my head. But then sometimes it's literally just like it appears in my head and I was like, what is that? Don't do that. But yeah, for the most part it is the first one. The first one I said.
So am I understanding correctly that a lot of times you like to have an iterative creativity? So you hear something that generates ideas, and then from that idea, more ideas are generated. But it's sort of like having a spark plug for your creativity car. You like having a spark plug to then give you ideas. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
This might seem like a weird question, but I'm genuinely curious. Percentage-wise, how often are you using the spark plug method, and how often are you independent of any immediate input coming up with you're just hearing it in your head, which we could call audiating? How often are you just audiating a brand new idea?
I would say like 60% spark, 40% it just appears like a vision in the night.
It appears like a vision in the night,
it's like an evil crypt ghost comes to me. He's like, yo, you heard this? I was like, whoa, cool, gnarly.
Excellent. ClascyJitto. The new game called Kipidon. You could check out early ideas and iterations of the soundtrack on Spotify and Bandcamp. Those links are in the show notes if you're on audio. They're in the video description if you're on YouTube. You can also check out a demo of the game. Again, the link is in the show notes if you're on audio. in the video description, if you are on YouTube, ClascyJitto, thank you so very much for taking time out of your creative day to come be creative with us. And thank you also for grooving with my linear thought patterns and rocking and rolling as I tried to be logical and you were being creative. So thank you for grooving with me.
No problem. It was nice.